from wherever you happen to be. It's the SNL Hall of Fame podcast. And now, here's your host, curator of the Hall, Jamie Dew.
Oh boy. Oh boy. I am looking out at the blue sky, and it's a gorgeous day here at the Hall. But nevertheless, would you please wipe your feet before you walk into these hallowed grounds, as it were. How are you doing? My name is Jamie Dew. I am your host and curator of the SNL Hall of Fame. And week over week, typically what we do is we sit with a guest and we discuss a nominee. This week, however, as was the case last week, we're doing things a little differently because voting is now open and there are no more nominees to nominate. So what I've done is I've assembled a round table of pundits, SNL pundits. In fact, this group of SNL pundits comes to us from the SNL Afterparty, which you can find at SNL Podcast on Twitter and any of the other socials. So I was really excited to welcome back John Murray, who nominated Tina Fey back when, and his compatriots, Katherine Coleman, who is host of the SNL Afterparty, and regular contributor to the SNL Afterparty is Steve Finn. So if you've ever listened to the SNL Afterparty, it's a great analysis and take apart of each episode. It typically comes out on the Monday following a new episode. And, you know, they do really great work over there. So give them a listen if you haven't already. I'm excited to get right into things because these three are going to take us through their picks for the SNL Hall of Fame. So if you have not voted yet, you can listen to how difficult the time they had selecting, negotiating, maneuvering their picks to try and, you know, satiate their own, you know, goals while simultaneously satisfying the criteria that is the voting process at the SNL Hall of Fame. But before we get into the show, I made mention a moment ago that some of you may not have voted yet. What's going on? Get voting. I can't understand this. Voting has been open since the 25th of April. And it's only going to be open until May 20th. And then it shuts down at 11:59 on May 20th. You can make your votes by checking out any of the socials at SNL HOF, or you can go to snlhof.com, click on the vote tab, and vote right from there. Anyway, we've got a round table to get to. I'm very excited. John Murray, Katherine Coleman, Steve Finn. We got a great show for you. Stick around. We have quite an assemblage of pundits today. So I'm really excited to introduce them to you all. Because what we are doing is we are going to have this group actually reveal their SNL Hall of Fame ballot in this episode. So it should be pretty great. And doing that with me, I've got Katherine Coleman. How are you doing, Katherine?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to be here and talk about my favorites.
Excellent. Yes. And I'm excited to hear who your favorites are. So this should be really great. And below you in the Brady Bunch architecture here, we have Mr. John Murray. How are you doing,
Hello.
John?
Very good. Glad to be back with you. We had you up on our show not too long ago. It's nice to be able to pop into your neck of the woods.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
And Steve, we have Steve Finn here joining us as well. How are you doing tonight?
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm doing well. It's more beautiful in here than I could have imagined. you got to give me the number of the guy who polishes this place because it is pristine.
he's exclusive. I'm going to tell you that.
Okay.
You'll never be able to get him.
I tried.
It's Lorne Michaels himself.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh,
So what we are going to do tonight is we are going to run through your SNL Hall of Fame ballots. We're going to do that in a clockwise order. So we'll start with Katherine. Then we'll go and when she announces her first nominee, I'll check in with the other two pundits to see if they have anything that they would like to say or if that person is in fact on their ballot as well. So that way we can keep the conversation neat and tidy. And yeah, I think we could pretty much kick it into high gear now. There's just one question that I have to ask before we begin, and that is you were allotted 15 votes or up to 15 votes. And I'm curious where you landed with that. If you ended up using all 15 or if you used none or some number in between. Katherine, how did you fare?
I'm still, as we begin this recording, on the fence with one, but
Okay.
I believe I'm going to use 12 votes.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Just for no specific reason at all whatsoever. I went through the list. I was like, I feel passionate about this one, this one, this one. There were a few where I was like, I mean, I could see it. I think they probably should be in there, but I'm not personally as passionate about it, So I was
Right.
like, do I give them a vote or not? And on some of them I landed no, some of them I landed yes. So that should
I'm
be
excited to hear what you've got for us. This is good. Well played. John, how about you?
So when I went over your list originally, I ran through it and there were 10 locks, like, yes, absolutely, no question. And I'm leaving myself open to being swayed a little bit. So if Katherine or Steve can inspire me, then I might be able to get behind some of their choices. But we're definitely in the double digits. Not sure if I'm going to get quite to 15.
Gotcha. Okay. Steve, how about you? What was your strategy going in?
oh man. I guess if you've ever been poor, not knowing where you're going to get your next meal, I guess it just sticks with you for the rest of your life. Because like I had 15, I was going to use 15. I wasn't going to waste anything.
That's right. No crumbs on the table. Or
No
on the board.
crumbs. Yeah, everything's getting used.
That's right.
I did slow down. I'll admit, once I got into the double digits, those last few check marks were, I had to make a little bit of an argument for them in my head to get me there. But hey, I think everybody on this list, whether I picked them or not, there is an argument for it. So I felt my 15 check marks were well spent.
Good. Okay. Well, let's get right to it then. Katherine, if you want to kick this show off, the formal part of the show, as it were. Anyway, let's hear what you've got.
All right, I'm going to come in. Because the thing that is interesting here, and this is only audio, so people may not see how significantly younger I am than everyone by at least 40 years.
40.
I believe I am the youngest person here. Not significantly, but enough that I do think I am of a slightly different generation. So I think that'll be an interesting way to color these takes. So with that said, my first vote is going to go to The Lonely Island. As writers, of course, we also had they did a little of everything really, but I think that they revolutionized SNL, and I don't think that's an exaggeration. Because I remember being in high school, and this was like 2005 to 2009, and I grew up in Alabama, and we have TVs there, despite what you may have heard. But people weren't really talking about SNL a lot. Like the people in my high school weren't diehard SNL fans. It had, I think the show at that time was maybe struggling to break into younger viewers. And then all of a sudden come these digital shorts, and everyone was sending them to each other. People were quoting them all the time. And so it just seemed like out of the woodwork came SNL into the consciousness of my generation and my friends. So like I'm on a boat, I know they kind of started with Lazy Sunday, but On a Boat was really the first viral video I felt like I was part of. It was just unavoidable. Everyone knew it. They were like, I feel like there were parodies of a parody video. So that just, I think that got the attention of people my age, and we were suddenly eager to see what was going to happen next week. What were they going to do? Who were they going to bring on? Like, who was, they had Akon. Who's next? Is T-Pain going to come on? And we got it, and we related to it, and I think that just really ushered in a new era. And since then, we've seen the rise of pre-tapes to the point where now on the show they have like 2 or 3 film units working on these every week. We've seen production values skyrocket, and I think all of that started and came from The Lonely Island, and so I think their influence is just incredible.
Absolutely. I mean, really changed the paradigm, right?
Yeah.
Went from there's always been video elements or film elements, but to make it just part of the show's DNA now. Yeah. You would never, I just watched this week's episode, and please don't destroy is absolutely carrying that baton. So it's been really interesting to watch. John, Steve, either you have The Lonely Island on your ballots?
There's a check mark there for me.
So I think this might be one of the situations where they weren't, but I think I can get behind everything Katherine said. What's interesting is, like, I think I wrote them off because they didn't come in as traditional writers, right? Like it's not like we remember them for all their brilliant reoccurring characters at the update desk or whatever. It's not like they were doing traditional SNL fare. And I wonder if that maybe biased me a little bit because, yeah, when you think about it, the show had never done like gonzo filmmaking, like in the week. We're going to start on Monday with everyone else and have something ready to go. And that takes a prowess, not just in the writing, but in the entire production process that wouldn't be fair to overlook. So yeah, I'm down. I'm thumbs up on that.
Yeah.
Influencer.
It's not like pre-tapes and short films weren't part of SNL's history before The Lonely Island, but I think The Lonely Island, that is when video shorts started to become hip and cool. Because yes, we had some Albert Brooks, we had some Robert Smigel, but these guys are a little bit dorky. They were a little bit older than the cast. It was the cast in the bell bottoms and the cool vests back in the day. That was the hip portion of the show. I think The Lonely Island is where it started to flip, and the pre-tapes is where, this is what YouTube is taking off, and that style of content consumption became the norm, and they were right there to take advantage of it. So yeah,
excellent.
I think they changed a lot with what they did.
So there's 3 more votes for The Lonely Island. Interesting. Yeah. All right, John, you're up.
All right. Well, I think I have to start with Tina Fey because I've already made the case for Tina Fey. That was the episode that we did back in the day.
Yeah.
So she's going to come up sooner or later. Might as well get her out of the way. Female head writer right there. I mean, that is a very small club to belong to. At a time when it was not the norm at the show for a woman writer to ascend to that level. On top of that, she kind of set the template in many ways for what modern SNL is, not just in how open it is now to comedy of different sensibilities, whereas the criticism for the first 25 years was frat boys and a certain kind of lowbrow humor that didn't really embrace what the women writers could bring. She was kind of the one that maybe she stood on the shoulders of some brilliant writers before her, but she was the one that just finally kind of got over that fence. And on top of it, she was kind of the sea change in the show between what I think is like truly vintagey compared to what's considered more modern SNL. And part of that is her writing influence, and also sort of how her Weekend Update sort of realigned what that is, and how the head writer is now all but a shoo-in as an anchor on that. Like that was something that she kind of trailblazed in a way. So there's a lot that as a writer she brought to the show, obviously, and just as one of the luminaries in the SNL sphere, that changed the show in many ways and just was the face and representative of the show, I don't think Tina Fey can be overlooked.
Wow. Yeah, that's a pretty good argument. Did Catherine or Steve have Tina Fey on their ballots?
No, you're hanging me out
Of
to
course.
dry? Oh,
No, of course I did.
I'm like, Catherine, you and Tina are BFF.
Me and Tina have run-ins frequently on planes, on trains, and automobiles. I thought about casting my vote for Tina first, but I didn't want to steal your thunder, John. She's my comedy idol. I think she's one of the funniest writers of all time. And like you said, her mark is just undeniable as the first female head writer, even because to me, her legacy isn't even about any individual one sketch that she wrote, but like you said, that mark that she left. There's that famous story about the Kotex Classic sketch where Paula Pell had been pitching this for years, and none of the men in the male producers, male head writers got it. And all it took was one other woman to be in the room and say, "Oh no, I get that. That's funny. Trust me, people will like it." And it became a classic. And I think she just really paved the way and carved out that space for women on the show. And then again, when I was in middle school, high school was when Mean Girls came out. And that just that was the definitive comedy movie of my generation. So I think a lot of people my age, when they think comedy, when they think SNL, Tina Fey is going to be one of the first people that comes to mind.
Steve, did you have her on your list as well?
I did.
For all you were really playing coy there.
Yeah, but all of these, for all the reasons that have been said, she's set a precedent, by being the first female head writer. Just what that has done alone is a reason to put her down as a vote. I just love the quality of every part of her work, even if it's just a simple throwaway joke. There's as much care and thought put into it as something that takes center stage, and that quality of work it goes through everything she does. I don't know if she's ever made anything I didn't like, and that consistency is pretty crazy. Like, she is the Smiths of comedians when it comes to quality throughout her career.
She also hates Johnny Marr as well. So
that's, yeah. Now you tell me that after I compare her to the Smiths.
Well, I'm just thinking that she's Morrissey, like. Anyway, all right. Yeah, I think it's really tough for some of these other categories to get recognition. So I'm really pleased to see you guys go right to a writer, pretty much right off the bat, both The Lonely Island and Tina Fey. It just seems as though the musical guest category and the writer category and the host category are sometimes tougher for people to wrap their heads around. But so far, like I say, you guys are 2 for 2, and that's really interesting. I think it says something about the angle that you guys are approaching here, and it'll be interesting to see how this plays out.
Well, you brought on a comedy writer. You also brought on, seasoned improv vet in Steve, and me, who's just enthusiastic about everything. I think this is what you're going to get tonight. That's kind of our niche a little bit. So
excellent.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward then.
That's our
All right, Steve, hit me.
Let's take something from the host category.
All right.
A fellow Steve by the name of Martin.
Yes.
I had to give him an accolade because, hey, I mean, what former host has been confused more often to be a cast member than Steve Martin?
Right.
It's like you see it in like the trivia section of the show. It's like, did you know Steve Martin wasn't actually a cast member? You just think that? It's easy to see why people make that mistake. You think of the 2 wild and crazy guys. You think of King Tut. There's so much of SNL's history. These milestone moments that you just can't imagine without him. And just his style of comedy and everything he's brought to the show. I feel like his contribution changed the show for the good, forever. And even as, the reasons to host has slowed down, I mean, he's pretty up there in terms of regular cameos. He's just one of those friends of the shows that, you're always happy to see him, but you're never surprised. Huh. Steve Martin on SNL. Who would have thought? Nobody ever says that.
That's true. And just talk about somebody that has just spanned the show as well, right? Like, I mean, other than the Ebersol and Dominion era, like, I mean, he's been omnipresent. Like, I think he hosted like 8 times in the original 5 seasons, and
He's
then
been on twice this season. Like,
like this bananas. So I'm guessing we're going to see another appearance of Steve Martin on another ballot here, but you guys can solidify that for me, Katherine, John.
He is certainly on mine. But Katherine, if you're on board, make your case first. Let me just sweep up.
Oh no, he's definitely on mine. But Steve literally stole everything I was going to say about, everyone thinks he was a cast member. I think the one thing Steve didn't say was he was the original he was the first 5-timer, right? No.
Well, they did the sketch for Tom Hanks originally, but they'd had 5-timers prior to that, but they didn't make it. It didn't occur to them to turn it into a goof until later. Yeah. But him and Buck Henry were probably the first 5-timers. Something like that.
It's one of the two for sure.
But yeah, I don't think there's a discussion of comedy in general without Steve Martin, and I think SNL is a big part of that. So yeah, he's a shoo-in.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, the only thing that I think about Steve Martin that maybe hasn't already been covered, because we don't want to be, retreading someone else's arguments here, is when the show started out, it blew up pretty quick. Like the cast caught on, and it was a phenomenon, but its staying power wasn't guaranteed just because they had a really hot first season. It really became who was going to pop in, who were these go-to hosts that were quickly becoming regulars, who you could always sort of like count on to be a go-to host every season. That tradition started very early with the show, and it's part of the reason why sort of like week after week, people got very comfortable tuning in, because they knew that these friends of the show were going to be popping in at various times, and you just kind of started to know, who the friends of the show were, and that stable of go-to talent. It was there very early on, and he was really the go-to very early on because he already had a deep bench of comedy that he was willing to bring into the show too, and had such a unique voice that it was a perfect complement to the cast. They were zany in their own way, but he had his patented thing that the world had already embraced. So he was just guaranteed laughs. And just someone that you would hope would pop in when you watched SNL in the early days. At least I assume that. I wasn't alive in the 70s, but the way I understand it is you this is what people were looking for. They wanted the killer cast, but they wanted people to come and play with the cast that were already tried and true, and that's what Steve Martin was.
Excellent. Well, you didn't miss much in the 6 years of the 70s that I enjoyed. So
sure.
Okay, where are we at here in terms of, we're back to Katherine, right? In terms of next pick?
Oh, wow. Back to me already.
Yeah.
Well, who do I want to go with? Excuse me. I'm going to go cast my vote for Melissa McCarthy as a host.
Interesting. All right, let's hear this.
Yeah. I would actually claim Melissa McCarthy is like the modern Chris Farley. Not in the sense, it's not to say that all like plus size performers have this one category, one niche they can fill, but I think that they both are like very physical comedians, and they both like kind of making fun of themselves is kind of entwined in what they do, right? So I just think she had such a big moment when I was in college, like after Bridesmaids came out, and that's when she really started appearing on the show, like almost every season, in a row right there. And I couldn't get enough of her. Pizza Business is one of my all-time favorite sketches because of what she brought to it. Like, I don't think the writing of Pizza Business is the most brilliant piece of sketch comedy we've ever seen, but her performance is one of the best sketch comedy performances I've ever seen. And there's bits in that you cannot convince me were not improvised at some point in the week. Like, I'm not saying she improvised them live on Saturday, but in rehearsal, I think she found the fun thing that they did with the pins. And I think that's something that someone like her brings to the table when they host that just makes her such a really unique person to have in the room, just bringing their own thing. And she just has such a natural ability as a performer to just hunt out those laughs and do anything to get them. And then, the Sean Spicer impression was iconic. I'll never forget the first time that podium drove into the crowd. So yeah, Melissa McCarthy, big fan.
Yeah, that's a great pick. She is somebody who has also become, a friend of the show, I would say at this point. If she's in New York, there's a chance, if there's a chance, she might show up. And that's always fun, right?
Mm-hmm.
So John and Steve, does Melissa McCarthy appear on your ballots?
She does appear on mine.
Oh,
That's
I
all
don't have her. I thought I did, and now I'm
That's
looking
okay.
at it.
She's getting plenty of love tonight.
I thought I did, and now I realize that the check mark I thought I was seeing was just the Y in McCarthy. But yeah, I mean, if there's an argument to vote for her, it's too late for me. I mean, I could change my mind possibly, but I'm just going to stick with what I have. But I will say that Melissa McCarthy, she pretty much started that whole trend of celebrity cameos to play people of the Trump administration. When you think about it, that was what you heard every week. Who's going to play this person? Who's going to play Steve Bannon? That became a thing. And it never was a thing. You just say, okay, which cast member is going to do it? And now it's like, which famous actor or actress is going to come in to do this? And she was the start of that trend, which probably gave SNL the best ratings it's had in quite a while. So that's the argument to make if you were to be one of the people who voted for her, which is not me.
So your ballot though wasn't big enough to put her on, and that's fine. I think there's multiple years that these people are going to appear on the ballot if they don't make it this year. So don't feel too bad.
Get her next year.
That's right. But she's got 2/3 of this panel, so she would be in the Hall of Fame under this panel format. So, John, do you have anything you want to add, or?
Just that I think my vote for Melissa McCarthy has a lot more to do with me just having been a fan of hers for 20 years. I am a closet Gilmore Girls super stan. There's no exaggeration here. I've watched the show end to end multiple times. It's infinitely quotable. I love it. And she obviously was a big part of that show. But what was interesting is liking her from that show. I knew a little bit of her background because she came through Groundlings. And there was a bit of tragedy there because she came out, she got the role on Gilmore Girls. It was a good role. Then she didn't have a whole lot to do immediately after that. And there was a bit of a lull in her career. And I actually remember back in the day feeling bad. Like, she was so talented and it was such a charming role that she played on Gilmore Girls. And everyone who knew her from the Groundlings said that she was the girl. Like, she had it. And for whatever reason, it just didn't connect with SNL or some other like comedy institution that she could come up and really like show her brilliance. She just, for whatever reason, the stars didn't align for her that way. And then obviously Bridesmaids happened and the stars finally aligned for her. And I just really remember enjoying that whole era of watching her finally come into her own and become a household name and get the accolades she deserved as a comedic performer, because I'd always heard these whispers of the people that had been with her in Groundlings that just could never figure out why she never got that opportunity, because she was so good and so well liked. And just nice to see it come together. And it's nice that SNL could be the platform, the place where she really could thrive and show us what she could really bring. And it was nice to see, and I like her, and that's all.
I mean, there's an alternate dimension where she becomes not ready for primetime player, like, for
right.
sure. Absolutely. Yeah. Like, she's got the chops. She's amazing. The physicality is, like Catherine was saying, is, top shelf. The Farley comparison is definitely noted. I think that makes a lot of sense. I hadn't considered that at all. So yeah, that's really great. Melissa McCarthy. All right. John, who have you got next?
Are we allowed to bounce around categories as we see fit?
Of course. Yes.
Okay. Well, why don't we jump into the cast member category?
Sure.
And I'm going with Eddie Murphy. I think that this, I just don't see any way around it. Eddie Murphy is in many ways, is the reason why we still have SNL today.
For sure.
He was a late hire in the Gene Domanian era, but his talent was undeniable. He wasn't really getting the respect and love he deserved when he initially joined the show, but that quickly changed under Ebersol, and he was allowed to thrive at the show, created numerous pop culture moments, that the world embraced. His characters and the antics they got up to and the occasional assassination attempts. It was just, it was the Eddie Murphy show for many years on SNL. And there hasn't been anyone else since that I think was as crucial to the show's survival as his was, and getting it back on its feet during a turbulent era. It needed a star, and he was that star. He played that role, and it's why we have the show. And how many angles do you need to hit it? Eddie Murphy, he's a star.
Absolutely.
Somebody else chime in.
Tour de force.
Yeah.
Anybody else have them on their ballot?
I do. It's I think his rocky start on SNL just goes to show that he was too good to fail. Gene Domanian likes to take credit for discovering Eddie Murphy, but she pretty much had to be talked into hiring him. And even then, she got in the way of him doing very much on the show while she was in charge. So I like to think that, if she got her way and never hired Eddie Murphy still would have led. He still would have somehow gotten to doing Raw and
The Clumps.
Yeah, that we still would have gotten Eddie Murphy because he's just such a powerhouse of talent. But here we are, with him saving SNL because he was just too good to be held down, and he rose above, everything when the top people didn't believe in him. And it's a great story of if you're as good as Eddie Murphy, you're gonna make your way.
Yeah, I think so. Right, the cream rises to the top for sure.
He's the cream.
Yeah.
For the sake of throwing in a little drama, I'll say that Eddie Murphy, I was a little on the fence about.
All right.
Let me tell you why, because I know that's a hot take. He's so big and his career has been so massive. It almost eclipses his time at SNL. It's I feel like he's such a big thing, you just forget that that's where he started. But nonetheless, he started there and has had this crazy career and had so many breakout amazing moments. I did end up putting him on my ballot, but
good.
I briefly considered not, just for funsies.
For fun.
Yeah, it is. I mean,
just to piss off John.
The context is totally lost on me in a sense. You're right, because how many active cast members could host the show? I mean, or have hosted the show? One, and that's just really far out. That just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I understand it was a scheduling conflict and everything like that, but still, he hosted the show, and when John said the Eddie Murphy show, he wasn't kidding to a certain degree. Now, there were a lot of other talented cast members, and some may make it to the Hall of Fame at all, may make it to the Hall of Fame. We don't know. But certainly the light shone brightest on Eddie Murphy, for sure. So, Steve, who have you got next?
Oh, allow me to check, sir. We haven't done a musical guest yet, have we?
Nope.
Well, why don't we do one?
All right. 2, 3, 4.
I threw down Prince.
All right.
And it wasn't one of my first choices, but I was pretty light on musical guests, to be honest. If I could spoil it a bit, I've picked 2 out of what's here on this list. Prince being one of them. And it's not even because like he's had a huge contribution to the show. It's just that when he's been on the show, it has an impact that is hard to deny. It's certainly more extreme than most musical guests. I mean, who else can you think? And Catherine, let me finish. Who else can you think that can convince them to change the whole format of the show so he could play a big medley in the beginning or in the middle? You know, like it's just not what they do, and they'll do it for Prince because he's
Prince.
He's such a institution, right?
Yeah.
And I think, it's not Prince himself. This is weird because I don't think it's Prince who deserves the Hall of Fame, but I think it deserves a vote. Just the idea of his relationship with SNL, because SNL has done so well catering to his ego, and he's an eccentric. They've been in the business long enough to know how to deal with people like this. And, I mean, I lined up outside of Massey Hall for a Prince show that never happened because he just wasn't feeling it. Like,
Oh, wow.
like I've seen pictures, like the stage was set up, he was ready to go. I was in line, ready to go in and watch the show. And he was just like, nah, let's not do it. So like, just the fact that SNL can like reliably get him to perform on the show, like they must be biting their nails up until he actually walks on that stage. Because you never even, he might say, Mercury's in retrograde. I'm not gonna perform like that. That must be a fear they have. But yeah, I think you get why I voted for him.
I think he's culturally significant. We saw him come of age on the show from that first performance in 1980 or 1979. I forget when it was. I want to say 1980. All the way to the legend, the stories of him playing the 40th. And frankly, how many other musical guests have passed away after performing on SNL and have had a show dedicated to them? Like there is a Prince memorial episode, that just doesn't happen. So I think he is certainly in the friend of SNL category, and I think it's a great pick. I'm curious if he shows up on any other ballots. So
he does show up on mine, but not because I have anything, exciting to add to the conversation about him, other than you can't deny Prince is in the absolute upper echelons of, musical gods. And, has a history with the show that is unique in some ways in, how Steve laid it out, and just in the performances in general, they're very watchable. If you go back and you see him performing the way that he performs in 8H, because the cameras are very close and it's sort of an intimate framing, and there's a lot you can pull away, and he does an epic sweeping opus of a performance, and that's noteworthy. So that's why he made my list.
great.
I did not include Prince. He's certainly culturally significant, but I think he's a little before my time, to the point that I don't necessarily think Prince on SNL when I think Prince. So
makes a lot of sense. I mean, you've got to ultimately pick who you're in line with, right? Like, I think the phrase in the SNL Hall of Fame is somebody that has made a significant impact on the show, has left a significant impact on the show. So if you don't feel that he's left a significant impact on the show, then he hasn't, and that's totally fine.
and my word's final. So
That's right. Yours is what I haven't told John and Steve is yours is the actual blueprint ballot. So All right. So next up, we've got Katherine with her next pick. What have you got?
Well, I'll say a moment ago, Steve said the words to me, Katherine, let me finish.
Oh, I know where.
I took as a personal attack because I would never interrupt someone so rudely like my arch nemesis did to my next vote for Miss Taylor Allison Swift. I mean,
I didn't even think of that when I said, oh, that's good.
well, I did.
I thought that's where you were going too. Listening to your show enough, I sort of have a sense of who you guys are. So.
Right. Anyone who's talked to me for more than 3 seconds knows that I'm a diehard Taylor Swift fan. It's really the SNL and Taylor Swift are the only two things I'm interested in talking about ever.
The match made in heaven then.
Exactly. So here we are. Where to begin with my case for Taylor Swift? You may want to start a timer. Because I want to start. I'll say I know this is for a musical guest, but when she hosted, it was killer. It was a great episode. But we'll put that aside and we'll talk about the fact that she's been the musical guest 5 times, which is a lot of times.
That's right.
And I think every one of her performances is to die for. But the one that we must discuss is this season when she performed the 10-minute version of her hit song, All Too Well. Because I think SNL doesn't just let anyone walk in and say, all right, I'm going to take up 10 minutes of your airtime. And they say, okay, but Taylor Swift can. Prince can. Like, that's special. And I think that speaks to her status in the world of pop culture. And that was a moment that was so special for me because that song came out 10 years ago. And ever since it came out, we wanted to hear this extended version. And then this past year, we finally got it. She performs it on SNL. It's a beautiful performance. She's got the video. She's got the leaves falling. It's everything. And that reminds me, and I think back to her other performances, you know, a few seasons ago, she performed Lover and she had the set with a piano and all these like letters suspended in the air around her. And I think going that extra mile in a performance and having some production quality just is what makes a great musical guest. And that's what makes it fun. Even for someone, you know, on our podcast, oftentimes we'll have a musical guest on. I'm like, well, I didn't really care for the music, but wow, the production of this was really cool. And I think that that's something that can grip, you know, every viewer, whether they like it or not, whether they like that genre or not. And, you know, I think Taylor Swift's a person that gets discounted left and right, but not to spoil my other musical guest vote, but I do think that over the history of time, we will look back at Taylor Swift as like my generation's Paul McCartney, of like, she's had this prolific career. Don't do that face at me, John. She's like very prolific. She's an amazing songwriter. And I mean, she's had a really stunning career. And I think, you know, she's stopped by SNL frequently. So I think she can be in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, she would be in my Hall of Fame. She's been, you know, certainly part of, you know, a big part of the show for the last 10 years. Like she's always in the, you know, in the conversation in terms of musical guests and performing double duty as well. You know that she, you know, she's up for it. So yeah, great pick.
I suspect I'm going to be alone on this one, and that's okay.
Are you alone on this? Let's find out. It sounds as though you're alone on this.
I can't help Katherine here. Maybe John can.
I am going to throw a vote to Taylor Swift in solidarity with Katherine, not because she was a pick of mine, but because, like I said, I was happy to be swayed if someone could make a compelling case. And this particular case has been made to me multiple times. And at a certain point, I just have to acquiesce and accept that if I ever want to not hear it again, I need to offer some token. But in all seriousness, yeah, of course. She's had some big moments on the show. She's been invited to participate beyond what the typical musical guest would typically do. And she's had some seminal moments like Katherine is all geeked out about. So I think she can take one of my votes. I think that's reasonable.
Cool.
John, I've never felt closer to you.
Yeah.
Oh, magic happens in the SNL Hall of Fame. John,
yeah.
You're up.
All right. Let's see. What do we want to do? All right. Let's talk about Phil Hartman. the show has gone through many eras, and the eras that are considered essential viewing typically have someone in the cast who is regarded as sort of the glue, the jack of all trades, the virtuoso, that just the person that was crafted by the comedy gods to be like the perfect SNL performer. I think Phil Hartman ranks among those people. He isn't the most famous person to come out of the show. He was, tragically, ended in his prime. So who knows, what else we would have seen from Phil Hartman if we'd had that opportunity. But what we saw from him on the show was undeniable in the subtlety he could bring to a role, the gravitas he could bring to the role, the pathos he could bring. Like he just had a presence and a charisma and a likability that works so well in the framework of SNL. And on top of that, he was just considered very highly by his peers as someone they could lean on, someone that knew when to steal a scene and someone who knew when to, pull back and let someone else shine. And just those heroes, those unsung heroes sometimes that made the show great in a more subtle way. I think they deserve accolades. And I think Phil Hartman was a standout of an era full of standouts. And that's saying something.
Great. Yeah. Phil Hartman was my first era, probably my first favorite performer next to Dennis Miller early on. Mm-hmm. I just thought they were so cool. So great pick. Mm-hmm. How about Katherine and Steve? Did Phil Hartman appear on either of your ballots?
He is on mine.
Yay.
Yep. John took the word subtlety right out of my mouth. There's a special nuance to what he does that is underappreciated is the word that comes to mind. I guess that is kind of true, but I think he was, he was beloved on the cast, but he didn't have to go all out to get a laugh from you. He wasn't like a Chris Kattan or a Belushi where, everything he did was up to the max. He could get a laugh from you by playing it straight. He could be a serious character and just find something in that calm energy that would make you laugh. And yeah, I mean, he could do it all. He could make you laugh. He could make you cry. I don't think there's anything that he couldn't do well that they could have thrown at him. So John, yeah, saying that he is the glue, that makes perfect sense to me. Because, he was like a Michael Jordan type. Just pass him the ball. Get the hell out of the way. You're going to get something.
I like that.
Yeah. This was one I was a little on the fence about. Not because I think he doesn't have a great legacy, but just because, again, it's sort of like Prince. Like for me personally, like I was a kid when he was on, but I think I've been well swayed to add him to my ballot because, like you're saying, it's easy to remember and pick out the Chris Farleys and the Eddie Murphys. But someone like Phil Hartman, who obviously can get the laughs, but is such a great utility player as well, can fly under your radar very easily. And I think he's a guy that you can slot into any role, or you could have slotted into any role, and he'll get the job done. And that's very valuable to a show like SNL.
Absolutely. The first name to appear on all three ballots in a little while here too. So that's pretty impressive.
We're back in sync.
That's right. Now, Steve, can you keep it in sync?
Let's see. I guess that means it's my turn.
That is your turn.
I'm gonna let's go for another host. Singer of the B-52s, John Mulaney. That's a little joke. I've recently learned how similar they sound. Somebody sent me a video, and it was what was it, Love Shack, and they just put a picture of John Mulaney up when Fred Schneider started singing, and it made me realize, okay, these guys sound exactly alike. It's crazy. Go listen to B-52s and think of John Mulaney. It will be ruined. So why? Let's get to why he's on the list. Who faster has gotten the 5-timers other than like the Buck Henrys and those kind of guys where they would like host multiple times per season. And so quickly did he like carve out a special version of SNL that reared its head every time he hosted. There was a very undeniable energy and sheen to every John Mulaney episode. And that's one thing. But you could also compare it to like giving Martin Scorsese an Oscar for whatever shitty movie he got for. What was it? The Departed, finally?
The Departed.
We know why he really got it. He got it for the body of work that came before. And I think I could like sneak in a vote, not only for his job being done as a host, but also the contributions he made as a writer on the show and a occasional correspondent on Weekend AM or Weekend Update. I just said my own show. Yeah. I'm not going to bleed this dry. I'm sure the other guys got John on the list.
Other than Tina Fey and Conan O'Brien, have any other writers come back to host? Like it's a pretty elite group.
Well, Louis C.K. wrote like very
there you go.
super briefly.
Yep. No, you're right.
But there's people that
Larry David host, or did he just have some cameos?
he did host. He
host.
hosted
Yep.
when Bernie Sanders
Yep.
was the So yeah, it does happen. It's not a typical thing, but it does happen. But it would still put him in a very elite club as well.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, Jamie, if set me up if you want, but I can just run with
Absolutely,
it if we want to talk some more John Mulaney, because he's on my ballot as well. For all the same reasons as Steve, I'll try to not restate too much. There's a lot of players that have come through the show that we don't always realize that they were made better because of the allies they had on the 17th floor. They're like, some people, they just click with certain writers and they make magic together. And one of them is not as strong as they could be without the other. And I believe John Mulaney was one of those kind of assets for some of the players at SNL, Bill Hader not the least of which. Mulaney,
First that comes to mind.
Yeah. Mulaney has an incredible ability to like pick up whatever someone's throwing down. Like, he can get in sync with where someone's trying to go comedically and pile on and add that spice and that little bit of specificity and that just extra joke, just extra little something to turn a funny idea into magic. And as a collaborative writer and as someone that I think the show recognized was going places, I think it's undeniable that John Mulaney was one of those standouts when he was there as a writer. Unfortunately, we're talking about him as a host, but just to put a pin in that part of it and make the case for him as a host, I think it's really, really simple. Steve said, he was fast tracked to the 5-timers club. Of course, because the first time he came, he pulled out stuff that he didn't have the clout to get on air. That was brilliant stuff that he had written for the show. And he was able to take SNL and make it the John Mulaney comedy hour. And there's not a lot of hosts that can do that. There are some, but John Mulaney knew why he was back at the show. He knew what he wanted to accomplish. He knew how to lobby and get what he wanted through. And he still had enough friends at the show that it just was like just a great coming together. And they built on that momentum and they created, marquee sketches that you knew had to happen when Mulaney shows up. Those are all hallmarks of a standout host. So how can you not for John Mulaney?
Here, here.
For sure, yeah. John Mulaney is, I'll make it another unanimous vote here. I think he's the biggest stand-up comic right now. He's sold out multiple nights at Madison Square Garden. That's not something most stand-ups will ever do. I
did last week.
He's just like such a crazy success story from writer at SNL, not cast member, to failed sitcom,
Right.
to suddenly very popular stand-up 5-time SNL host. That's wild. John, you took the words out of your mouth. I was going to go on this whole rant about Diner Lobster and how beautiful it was that it got rejected, and then he brought it back because that's another one of my all-time favorites. Pizza Business and Diner Lobster are like my top two, and they volley back and forth with each other. But, love them or hate them, those Mulaney musicals are part of the fabric of SNL now. It's a big thing. And like you said, his thumbprint is... A Mulaney episode is a Mulaney episode.
Yeah.
His thumbprint's on every little thing in there. He has such a unique voice. I think that makes for a really great host that we're going to keep seeing every season for a while, I think.
Just listen to the B-52s. It's not the most unique voice.
Wow, he brought it full circle. That's a nice little button.
All right, Catherine, you're up with your next pick.
Oh, man. All right, where to go? Give me a second here. All right, my next pick is going to be Chris Farley. Need I say more? He is legendary. And obviously, there were those breakout performances, with Matt Foley, motivational speaker. We had the Chip and Dale sketch. But I think his legacy, bigger than that, is just inspiring thousands of kids to become comedians. Imagine if we had YouTube in the 90s, the just deluge of kids doing Matt Foley or like fat guy little coat from Tommy Boy. That's all YouTube would consist of. So I think that's a heck of a legacy. And then on top of that, the representation of, larger bodied people on TV. And I think he created a path where, little kids that are bigger saw, I can be on TV, I can be funny, I can get the laughs. I see this now for myself, and I think that's a big step for representation. We talk about it across all types of categories, but weight is included in that, and so I think that's just such a big influence that he had, and you can't understate his legacy on the show. And unfortunately, another one that was gone too soon, so we didn't get to see everything he had to offer us.
Yeah, absolutely. Tragic. We saw him like a month before he passed, like he hosted the show. Like it was, I know it was an incredibly short window. Yeah. Maybe it was a little longer than a month, but
within 2, I think. Yeah,
it just absolutely tragic. And it was nice that we got to see him, in 8H one more time. And I think he'd be a welcome addition to the Hall of Fame for sure. So does he appear on any other ballots? That's what I'm curious about.
Yay.
Yep.
Both.
I said yes, but John nodded first. So,
Steve, go for it. I want to sweep up because I could talk forever on Chris Farley. So,
this is where things get kind of down. Because I feel like Chris Farley is an example of how you could just suffer from your talent. I mean, for whatever reason, Chris Farley felt like he had nothing to offer to the world other than his gift of comedy. And for that reason, he was never comfortable to turn it off. And I can't think about how exhausting it must have been for Chris Farley, who he just felt like, people liked him for what he did as a comedian. And if he wasn't that for a second, then people would see something else, something they didn't want to see. And, for all the reasons to say Chris Farley belongs in the Hall of Fame for all the amazing work he does, I think he also should be in there as some kind of warning. You know, I think we've come a long way in dealing with mental health since, you know, the era of Chris Farley and the resources we have, and just the amount of stigma we've taken off talking about this. You know, we've come a long way, and I think this is a good example of why we need to talk about these things. Because sometimes we bottle them up and we use our funny man persona to put a layer of dirt over it. And sometimes it's just too late before, you know, it catches up. 5
Oh boy.
silence.
Oh boy.
Didn't I warn you? Didn't I
If you
warn you?
layer
You did.
a violin under that in the edit.
You could just cut all this out and say,
Just
Steve
put
was
a bit
wrong.
of
He
put a
miscounted.
bit
He only
of
had-
canned laughter under his whole little monologue there.
yeah,
Really
sure.
screw with people.
Just put the Betty Hill fucking music.
No, I think it makes a lot of sense. You know, I think when you were describing him being on all the time, and I just had that vision of him in the Gap Girl sketch where he's eating the French fries, and all of a sudden he's just like, "I'm freaking starving," you know, like breaking character for just a brief second. You know, obviously it wasn't breaking character, but he was breaking the Gap Girl character. But I wonder if that would be like Chris Farley in private. Like I just need a moment of just calm, you know?
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah.
John?
Mm-hmm.
He was on your ballot too?
He's certainly on my ballot. If I were to sum up my path to SNL, it was I came for Wayne's World. I stayed for Chris Farley.
Yeah.
That's, you know, I started watching right around 91, 92. And that was Farley in his prime. He was coming up with Spade and Sandler, and they had set a tone for the show, for better or worse. But amongst them, there was nobody just that exuded the kind of energy and fun that he could, and that just spilled out of the screen, and it was hard to not connect with that watching it as a young kid. You know, Catherine talks about representation. I was a bit of a chonkerdoodle as a youngster, so maybe I saw a bit of myself in Chris Farley. So I would struggle to put my finger on any one thing that, you know, is quintessential as far as summing up Chris Farley, but I just know that I connected with him, and I enjoyed tuning in to find out if, you know, Matt Foley was going to give another motivational speech or whatever it was, El Nino, it just everything he did was so memorable. And yeah, the best moments I had watching SNL in that era before the big mid-90s reboot, most of the moments probably were Chris Farley driven, and I love the guy.
All right.
Chonkerdoodle, is that medical terminology?
It is, yeah.
That is politically correct.
Yeah,
Mr. Murray, you've been diagnosed with chonkerdoodle.
All right. Where are we on the
we're completely off the rails. That's where
you've thrown me off a little bit. I won't lie to you. The Chunkerdoodle. Anytime
I
anybody gets
nominated
into-
Farley, so
Anytime anybody gets into medical terminology, you know. John, you are up.
I am up. Okay. Let's
And
see.
just so everyone knows, John, you are at 10. You've cast 10 votes. Catherine, you've cast 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. And Steve, you have cast 8.
Yep, that's what it looks like to me.
Okay.
Yes.
So who can I make a good case for here that I got left? Well, you know what? Let's talk Maya Rudolph. I'm giving her a vote because I feel like she, again, is one of those people that came into the show, brought so much more than we'll ever remember. And just, there were episodes where she was ever present just because she always could carry some load. She was, I don't feel like she ever pigeonholed herself. And I think the writers quickly realized that they always could lean on her for pretty much anything. she didn't have like a huge breakout after the show and didn't really become the household name that I was expecting her to when she left the show. She had some sitcoms, like she worked, she developed things, she did stuff, but she didn't have, that big breakout moment. So a lot like Melissa McCarthy, I was always wondering, like, how do such fantastic talents not find something to shine with? And so I still hold that the best stuff we've ever seen from Maya Rudolph was on SNL. I feel like she's just really in her mode when she can put on a silly wig and just go for broke and just go over the top with it. And I think that she loves the medium, and I think that she's just fearless in how, goofy and out of her own head she's willing to get. Like, she's very in the moment, very quick on her feet, and very versatile. And just one of those, I'll use the word again, glue performers on the show that I think she did so much in her tenure. And Lauren obviously understood that, and that's why she's still part of the family, and why they will still try and find any reason to bring her back for a cameo or a political impression or whatever it is. Maya Rudolph, she's part of the SNL stable. I think that's good.
Yeah, absolutely. She'd be a great representative of that era as well in the SNL Hall of Fame for sure. Does she appear on any other ballots?
I thought I might be alone on this one.
Yeah, she's not on mine.
Okay.
But I just want to say one thing. If you want to see what if you want to see her greatness truly at work, go check out that sketch she did where she sings the national anthem. I forget if she was playing a character or whatever, but
was it as Shakira? No.
I don't know.
It was as someone, I think.
But that's just a masterclass in like finding new ways of making the same thing create new laughs over and over again. Like, I've never seen so much wrung out of, just simply singing the national anthem. It is.
Yeah. She could like just hold a pose long enough for it to become memorable and funny and draw a little bit extra out of the material. Right. Like, yeah, she had a lot of physicality and just a goofiness that would elevate material like that.
Yeah. And if it wasn't a pose, it was like a certain ad lib, but like that sketch in particular, like every little thing she does, you could see some bigger, larger than life, diva singer doing in some way. Like, it's all something you've seen in self-indulgent pop music. It's a masterclass, I'm telling you.
Yeah, there's a reason why she played Whitney Houston and Beyonce.
Yeah. Hey.
Is she on your ballot, Catherine?
Maya was one of the ones I was a little on the fence about. Because I think I love Maya Rudolph. I think she was a great performer. But when I think of that era, she's not the first person that comes to mind. I think it was kind of like Phil Hartman. Very easy for her to get overshadowed by the Kristen Wiggs. So I don't know. I'm still on the fence. Can I decide at the end of the show if I want to definitively give her a vote?
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. It's your ballot. Yeah, absolutely.
Because I think I have like one or two more spare votes left.
Yeah,
so
that totally wouldn't fly on our show if you were being wishy-washy. Yeah, no.
I was very assertive this week, John.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a fun show. Not to get too far off track. Okay, sorry.
Yeah. Steve, you're up.
Am I?
Yeah.
I'll stop laughing like an idiot then. Who am I going to pick? Have we done a writer in a while?
It's been a while.
It's been a while. Okay. Let's just get Michael O'Donoghue out of the way. Michael O'Donoghue, I think he deserves it because out of this list, who is more old school SNL than Michael O'Donoghue? Like, he comes from the National Lampoon days. That's arguably the blueprint for SNL. A lot of the talent came from there, and yeah, I mean, everything that Michael O'Donoghue did on the show is like, so much of it is quotable, memorable stuff. Like everybody remembers that very first sketch of feeding the fingertips to the Wolverines. Everybody remembers, his impression of getting shards of glass pressed into his eyes or whatever it was, he just had a very punk mentality, and he was very much like, I'm going to do shit my way. Get these Muppets out of here. Like he stood his ground for his comedy. And I think he really set a precedent in those hallways to stand your ground. And yeah, I think he cultivated like a whole culture just from his attitude towards comedy.
Yeah, I think you saying, the first thing we see in the history of the show is Michael O'Donoghue. Now, not that should be, the ultimate argument, but like it goes to show he was the first head writer. Arguably, Lorne was the first head writer, but like he was the first non-Lorne head writer. Sort of a big deal. Like in terms of crafting the architecture of the show. Like this is what the show is, or can be, or might be. Anybody else have him on their ballot?
He wasn't on my list, but listening to you guys talk, I'm wondering if maybe I want to throw him a vote just in recognition of him being sort of the figurehead of the old guard that defined the show's original sensibility. He brought the National Lampoon basically to SNL and kind of fused the dark satire and just some of the more risque, less typical for network television type of material that helped distinguish SNL as a little more a little more punk rock, I guess is maybe the best term. And just gave them a little bit of counterculture credibility. And the show needed that early on because that's who they were courting for their audience, and it resonated and people were ready for it. So Michael O'Donoghue, I don't know if he was an inspired hire or an inspired writer, but you can't deny that the show is better for him having been in the mix as long as he was.
Aye.
Katherine?
Yeah, he didn't make my cut for no reason really other than he's just not my sensibility comedy wise. I mean, I think he's left a mark on the show. That's definitely a fair argument, but when I think of SNL, those aren't going to be my favorite sketches. So.
We've come a long way from that sensibility for sure. Like yes, we're still living in that same house, but it's been renovated immensely.
Katherine will write for Felt. She will do it.
I will. Mm-hmm. And now my dog's going to squeak her toy for 5 minutes.
Speaking of Muppets.
We can play with Dragon later.
Katherine, you're next.
Oh, shoot. All right. Ooh, we're getting down to the nitty gritty.
Yeah,
here.
we're in the nitty gritty here, folks.
Let's see. Oh my God, she's picked a new toy. Hold on.
What the fuck?
It's a different dinosaur.
Jeez. No wonder they're extinct.
My husband left town today. Usually he handles all the pets during recordings. All right. Give you a clean cut there. All right. I think I'm going to give my next one. We're going to go to another host. I'm going to go Justin Timberlake. He was just so huge there for a while. Obviously I grew up with NSYNC. So the mark that Justin Timberlake had on my childhood was I memorized all the dance moves. I was performing these things in the living room. But then, he went solo and then he had a great solo career. And then he just merged into this acting world and doing SNL all the time, being pals with Jimmy Fallon and being pals with Andy Samberg. And it's almost to the point where those friendships cement him in because thinking about Andy Samberg gets so entwined with Justin Timberlake that he's just part of that conversation, largely because Dick in a Box, which has to be one of the most well-known SNL songs of all time. That was that era, like I talked about with The Lonely Island, that brought SNL to, my people my age, and Dick in a Box was a big one. And so it's silly, it's stupid, but it still holds up to this day. It is still funny. And Justin Timberlake really just performed the heck out of it. And then he has many other, Timberlake sketches, Bring It On Down to Homelessville, all those things. So yeah. I think Timberlake gets in.
I mean, he was an enormous part of the show for quite some time, really, wasn't he? Like, it just seems strange that when that cast left, he sort of didn't overlap. Yeah, he didn't do what a lot of, your Steve Martins do, and, come back and work with an entirely new group of people. Now, that's not to say that he's not, destined to come back, because I'm sure that would be a big deal. But yeah, probably not quite as big a deal as it once was, because it was so enormous at one time. Did he appear on Steve or John's ballot?
Mm-hmm.
John, you're saying yes?
I am, but I just always want to give Steve the next shot at getting a few blows in before we...
I'll go first. I mean, he's up on too, so we can talk about that.
Another triumvirate there.
Woohoo! You know what? Here's what Justin does. He comes on SNL and he says, "Hey guys, I'm going to make y'all forget what I'm actually famous for." You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. He has no business being this good at sketch comedy. I guess it's the Mickey Mouse Club in him. But yeah, like you take a member of NSYNC, you give him a couple of years of a solo career, and all of a sudden he's getting like big laughs on SNL, blending in, almost as a cast member. I say almost because he's still too suave and and polished, but he's definitely one of these Taylor Swift types where there's just a strong friendship. And yeah, it may be contained within a certain era of SNL, but hey, I mean, when was the last time Alec Baldwin hosted? These things slow down. And, I'm sure Jimmy Fallon is going to be hosting again soon. If Justin Timberlake doesn't beat him to it, we'll probably see him on the show for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just a little prediction.
All right. And John, you want to clean it up?
Yeah. It's interesting. For a long time after Lorne Michaels came back in the mid-'80s, the show mined the original friends of the show as repeat hosts and, the five-timers and all that kind of stuff. There was an era of annual hosts that the show had that led right up into the mid-'90s, where you knew you were going to see Tom Hanks every year or two at least. And Steve Martin was still in the fold, and Alec Baldwin, came up in that era. So there was an era in the late 80s, early 90s where they kind of established all their go-to friends of the show that carried through to the 2000s, but they kind of petered out. In the late 90s, the show wasn't like grooming new friends of the show, or it just wasn't an era that was like producing a lot of friends of the show that endured the same way that the Tom Hanks and the Alec Baldwins and the Steve Martins did, and the John Goodmans and so many more. We just didn't have that same kind of like whatever the graduates come back to hang out again kind of thing that happened in the mid 90s as the show built that momentum and that bigger tent. So it's interesting going into the 2000s. That just wasn't what I remembered the show being. I wasn't tuning in to see which friend of the show was going to pop in week over week, because it felt like it was such a new class when they rebuilt the show in the late 90s that it just wasn't what the show was all about. But then slowly over time, these weird moments happen where just someone that is so good and so tuned into what SNL can do, they just come in and they dominate, and they just show that they're that triple threat, and that they just gel so well with the production. And Justin Timberlake was kind of like the first big one in a long time. At least that's my recollection of watching the show at that time. And it was just fun to see like an A-list top tier celebrity just come and get raunchy and goofy and stupid with Andy Samberg. And like there was just something, a lot of fun about what he brought. And it just wasn't the norm at the time, which I think makes it a little more special.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah. Now, where are we in the circle? That was Catherine's, right? That was Catherine's pick, Justin Timberlake. Okay, John, you're up.
There's no way Dan Aykroyd's not getting in, but I want to be able to say I voted for him when. The guy that you had on your cast to make the case for Dan Aykroyd was just so dialed in on who Dan Aykroyd is and his life and the path that he led and why it's so exceptional that I think the best thing I can offer here is to tell people to go listen to that episode, because I had a lot of fun listening to it. But what I can say over and above what's already been said is that Dan Aykroyd is probably the reason why I ever sought out SNL at all. And that's because he created and wrote Ghostbusters along with Harold Ramis. So that was kind of my introduction to like where are all these people coming from, and then finding SCTV and then finding Saturday Night Live and just understanding just understanding that world a little more, all resulted effectively because Dan Aykroyd just has the weirdest way of looking at the world, and occasionally, it sparks brilliance. With Ghostbusters, it was just because he had such an odd fascination with those kind of topics that he was just the right person to be able to write that kind of stuff, because of his family history. With SNL, it was because he was so he was more of a renegade than I think people gave him credit for, in his willingness to just like get out of his head and just like pick up the baton and run with it and just like do the job. And he again, I hate to beat a dead horse. He was a glue player in his era because he was so versatile. What?
Speaking of dead horses.
Yes. Well, yeah, that got dark. I don't think the first 5 years would be what they are if he wasn't doing the heavy lifting in so many sketches. He was so multifaceted, so quick-witted and quick with his tongue. Like, listen to the runs of dialogue that he could deliver flawlessly on live TV. Like in the moment, like he rarely flubbed a line. And if he did, he was still a total pro. And he just could chew through the densest, most convoluted dialogue and present it with panache. And he just, I don't know, he was well suited for those first 5 years. And you see so much of his brilliance when you go back and rewatch them without, like in the 70s, you were probably tuning in for your player, your favorite player, your Belushi or your Chevy Chase or whatever. But if you just go back and just see how much Dan Aykroyd pops up and what exceptional work he's always doing, it's undeniable. He's in. If he's not in, I renounce my seat on the whatever committee.
Don't do that.
He's going to put his shoes back on.
Well, let's see if he can get 2/3 of the votes on this panel. Catherine and Steve, do either of you have Dan Aykroyd on your ballot?
Of course. Steve, no?
Oh no!
Everybody's saying, "Oh, of course, you're an idiot if you don't put Dan Aykroyd out there."
You gotta represent Canada, man.
Well, his best work was that part of our heritage commercial he did.
Sure.
I don't know.
Not a Dan Aykroyd guy.
What was that?
Not a Dan Aykroyd guy?
I mean, I am a Dan Aykroyd guy. Like, Bassmatic, I mean,
Sure.
I think John had that in his mind when he was talking about how well he can chew through that dialogue. I mean, if I had more votes, I'm sure Dan Aykroyd would have gotten one. yeah, I mean, I guess I didn't give it to him because I feel like I would have to like go through the entire original cast and vote for them all. I had to draw the line somewhere. I mean, he was definitely one of the best. I guess I didn't have the same history that someone like John had, where like it opened up this whole world of comedy to him. Like that sounds like a much more meaningful connection to have with the guy than I've ever had. I mean, I've been a fan of his work, but like, hey man, there's been a lot of cast members.
Yeah. No, there's
been a lot.
Yes.
Don't
And just
apologize.
because he's
Yeah,
original,
don't apologize at all. You get to carve out
think you
your
should.
own. You get to carve out your own nominations here for sure.
All right.
But
Just
Catherine's
don't
not
lynch
wrong
me.
either. You could apologize a little bit, maybe. You know, he is Canadian. No, I'm joking. Catherine,
Sorry.
anything to add? Sorry, eh?
No, I just think any of the original cast have to be in the Hall of Fame. I think that's a shoo-in. I mean, that's just, I don't know.
That's the opposite of what I
Obviously,
said.
Yeah, I mean, you can feel differently, but I think, you know, to me, it's just that's the core of the show. They made the show. There is no discussion of SNL without the original cast being included in that. So, I mean, that, and obviously he's a great performer, but to me, the biggest thing was, original cast member, of course.
Of course.
Sure, for sure.
Of course.
Yeah.
Please stop saying of course.
Of course.
Not, you know. Catherine, who else, of course, do you have on your ballot?
Well,
I don't.
on that same vein, Gilda Radner. Basically same reason. I think original cast has to be on there. And of course I would identify Gilda as being more, to me, just an amazing, Dan Aykroyd's a great performer, but Gilda is like a stunning, just amazing, like once in a generation talent.
She was a superstar on the show for sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And like I said, there's just no discussion without those original cast members. So that's why Steve has now left this meeting.
Yes, that's right. I'm no longer here.
Oh, and I went out of order too. Shoot, Steve, you were next. Oh no. Oh, well, we'll continue this conversation about
that's because
Gilda.
he doesn't
The
count
hints
anymore.
were there. The hints were there that I was gone.
Oh shoot. We'll continue this conversation with Gilda. Did either Steve or John have Gilda on their ballots?
She is on my list.
Of course I did.
Original cast, you have to.
You have to. You are literally Hitler if you don't put original cast members on the ballot. Would you like me to go since I was supposed to go?
Sure.
What I will
Yes,
say,
please.
I just feel like Gilda was the first cast member that kind of transcended the screen and felt like your friend. I felt like I wanted to eat ice cream on the couch with Gilda. You know, that something about her is so infectious, and like you just want to pinch her cheeks. And I don't know. I think she's probably the first cast member of SNL that I've ever called a genius. I think we were watching like the best of Gilda or something. And, you know, just her way of looking at things and just her character work and everything she brought to the show was just it was so wonderfully her. And, you know, obviously we lost her too soon to cancer and
For sure.
and that's a big bummer. But hey, boy, did she ever leave a mark while she was here.
Absolutely. Yeah. I feel like, and one of you guys can jump in and correct me, but like Rosanna has got to be one of the first reoccurring characters like to appear on the show.
Yeah.
Emily Latella was before Rosanna Dana.
Oh, okay.
But
All right. Yeah.
Gilda,
Still Gilda.
Yeah.
Either way,
Still
yeah.
Gilda. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the
He didn't
violins
say
lady,
the first.
right?
He said one of the first,
Sure.
which still stands.
Yeah.
Thanks, Catherine.
But I think, you know, that example there is a testament to, you know, what she brought to the show. Stuff's so
Yeah.
good that they had to bring it back.
Yeah. You wanted to see it again. Yeah. So, John, she's in your ballot as well?
she is, for all the same reasons. I think the first time I watched the first 5 years to try and really absorb it and just kind of try and figure out how I would have felt if I was watching this back in the 70s, just try and take it on its terms. I don't think I quite connected with Gilda. Like, I knew that she was a fan favorite and I knew that she was just beloved for some reason. I couldn't really see it too obviously until I realized that not everyone watches SNL for the punchline. Some people watch it because there's just something magic about certain people on screen. There's just something that an energy, just a charm, something just intrinsically funny about the way that they see the world and can feed that back through the screen. And I may have been late to the Gilda party, but now I watch the first 5 seasons in many ways just to see what Gilda's doing and just see how she's gonna just turn her head and be doe-eyed in one moment and totally manic the next, and just realize that just as a performer who was just willing to like leave it all on the stage, I feel like you see this infectious energy that she gives very generously in her performances, and I do love tuning in and watching that for sure.
Yeah, one of a kind for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So, Steve, we'll get back to you now. Who would you like to add?
Okay.
Or who are you voting for, I should say, to keep the,
Well, let's get through this one. I put down Jim Downey.
All right.
I just feel like, his work on Weekend Update, that's some of the best stuff that he did with Norm. And he's had such an interesting history with the show. Like, if you don't know him from his time writing, you might know him as a cast member, or you might know him as that old guy that Jonah Hill made out with. He's had such a long tenure with the show, and it's been super rocky. I just think Jim's relationship with the show, just like, it's a good example of just how crazy it is to be in show business, and like how fickle and bipolar it can be. Yeah, I mean, he gets a lot of flack for some conservative opinions, but like, I mean, he used it to challenge, and
Absolutely, yeah.
I think it's definitely it brings a balance, or it brought a balance to the show when he was there. It's hard to deny that, Jim Downey was, a huge influence on the show.
I mean, he had to have been. He was there for, 25 plus years, right? 30
Right.
plus years. So certainly left a mark,
Absolutely.
Katherine and John, do we have Jim Downey appearing on your ballots?
He's not on my list, but I don't know. I'm thinking about reconsidering it, but I think I might actually be almost out of votes. So unfortunately, I can't throw one Jim's way tonight.
Yeah, you got one left.
Yeah, and I got one more selection, so I can't give it away.
How about you, Katherine?
You heard it here, folks. You heard it here first, folks. John likes Taylor Swift more than Jim Downey, and that's that.
I just lost all my SNL cred.
I do not have Jim Downey either.
All right.
Steve,
Had
you're
a
alone.
feeling.
Sorry.
I don't pick Dan Aykroyd, but I pick Jim Downey. These guys are going to have words with me after this.
So I went to Katherine before, and you gave us Gilda. So we'll now go back in correct order here, and we'll go to John
Okay.
for your last pick.
Yes, if my math is correct, this is my last inductee. I want to make the case for John Goodman, or not make the case, but just throw my weight behind him because,
Your chunker doodle weight.
yeah, again, it's all about representation. I think with John Goodman, there's two things that draw me to him. First off, I enjoyed Roseanne back in the day. So he was, a household name. He was someone that when I was watching SNL, he wasn't some esoteric host that I had no idea who they were, why they were on the show. I knew John Goodman. I liked John Goodman. So that, personal biases aside, though, he is just someone that in a different reality in the metaverse. What is it? The multiverse. In some other version of reality, John Goodman would have been on SNL. He was in the running at one point. He's an excellent in the moment performer. And the second he had a chance to actually come on and spend a week with the production, they knew, I think they knew, that maybe they'd, blown the hire, but they knew that he was someone that they wanted to have back. And, he's, what did he do? Like 11 or 12 in the course of 11 or 12 years, something like that. He was one of those annual hosts for however long. Yeah. And he still comes back. You got a Trump impression, we can count on John Goodman. He's just one of those people that gets the show. He's great in the moment. He's good under pressure. He's willing to be in the moment and be a great live performer, which is a talent in and of itself. So he really works well with SNL, and he turned in a lot of great shows over the years.
But is he on the other ballots? That's the question we need to know now. Steve, is he on yours?
Yes.
Oh, nice.
He is on mine. I feel like you could just edit the word John Goodman over Steve Martin and just replay what I said about Steve Martin, and it'll all apply.
Yeah.
I really think that John Goodman fit in as a cast member. He's just one of those guys where like you start looking at like greatest hits and he's showing up as a key player in these. We think about the Bears.
Oh, right.
I even think of stuff like when he played Linda Tripp. There's so much good stuff he's done on the show, and I won't repeat all the stuff John said because that was all true too. That's not why I'll repeat it. Won't repeat it. I won't repeat it to take up too much time in a podcast. So I'll just stop talking now before I go on too long. Again,
Katherine.
He didn't make the cut for me.
No,
and it might be another one of those things where he was really popular there for a while, but it was just before my time. But he's definitely a great performer. But yeah, he just didn't quite get over the line for me.
Who did get over the line for you? Let's hear it. Let's hear who you got.
Oh, are we back to me now?
Just give it.
Well, Steve's only got one more. Steve's at 14.
Okay. What? I thought I had
14. I got 14 for you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, I got 14 for you.
Okay, how did this happen? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. I got 15 here, and I still have Norm Macdonald and Paul McCartney to go.
Did you add one? Did you... You may have added one. I don't know, but I've got you.
Who do you have there? Just read the list.
I've got Lonely Island, Tina Fey, Steve Martin, Eddie Murphy, Prince, Phil Hartman, John Mulaney, Chris Farley, Maya Rudolph, Michael O'Donoghue, Justin Timberlake.
I didn't have Maya Rudolph.
Okay, I made that mistake. Sorry then.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll just take this from the top. Okay. I won't include all that. Riveting.
Read me your notes.
All right. So, Steve, you are up next then with your next pick.
Yes. I'll give you another. I'll finish off my musical guest entries. Paul McCartney.
All right. Let's hear what you have to say about Mr. McCartney.
I just feel like he makes the cut for arguments that you might have heard from Katherine about Taylor Swift. Wait, didn't you even say like she's the Paul McCartney?
My generation's Paul McCartney. I did make that leap.
Yeah. Okay. So that's pretty much it. He
He's a goddamn beetle.
He's a goddamn beetle. I mean, we could all think of that famous sketch that Lorne did, offering them money. I think there's even a rumor about them almost showing up for it. But I mean, how many times has he just waltzed on for a cameo for whatever reason? I feel like every couple of years I'm seeing him on the show, and that's like besides musical performances.
Yeah, sort of is there.
Yeah, he's one of the few musical guests I can think of that got 3 songs, 3 different musical breaks on a Christmas episode, I believe. And yeah, I mean his friendship with 30 Rock, it bleeds over to literally the show 30 Rock and other things. So even people that work within the SNL sphere, they still want to work with Paul McCartney after that experience. So, I mean, not only has he been such a big presence on the show, it seems like he's well liked behind the scenes as well.
Seems that way. Yeah, friend of the show for sure. Friend of Lorne, and friend of the show for sure.
That's what it is, right? It's friend of Lorne. Because I know people who worked on the show don't say nice things about Paul Simon, but how many times has Paul Simon been on the show? So,
Katherine, I believe you made mention of Paul McCartney in a couple different ways. You made mention of the fact that the Taylor Swift, the Generation Taylor Swift comment, and am I led to believe that he's also on your list then as well?
He is. You are correct. I alluded to it a bit in my Taylor Swift manifesto. And I mean, do you even have to justify Paul McCartney? He's freaking Paul McCartney. You know, he's a Beatle. He's an amazing musician. And like Steve, mentioned, that he's an integral part of the lore of SNL. That
absolutely
famous story of Lorne asked him to come on and he was with John and they thought about actually doing it, which may or may not be true. But that's the story as they told it originally. And that just gets passed down. And that's part of, like, you hear that story in regards to what makes SNL magical. Because it's live, it's happening. You can drive down the street and pop in if you're somebody like Paul McCartney. So I think, he's a shoo-in.
Great. All right. So we're right back to you again then with your next pick.
Well, John, did you have Paul McCartney? Did we skip you?
No, I'm all tapped out.
He's tapped out.
Oh, you're tapped out.
I considered it because I think he's an obvious person to nominate. I just didn't have anything particularly clever to say, so I stuck with the people that I thought maybe I could be a little more passionate about. But obviously, Paul McCartney, like, of course, he has to be a first round pick.
Of course.
Mm-hmm.
Of course.
Except for the fact he's not.
Well, he's on 2/3 of the panel's ballot. So
I feel like he doesn't need my help. He's Paul McCartney. He's a freaking Beatle. He's probably getting it.
Yeah.
I just hope not too many people think that.
That's true. Yeah.
He's fine. I don't have to vote for him. Oh,
yeah, but you know what? I think he's going to pull through. I don't think he's really like hanging his hat on whether he, whether we cast our vote for him. He's doing okay for himself, I hear.
Yeah.
Ever since Kanye West gave him that big break.
Not so bad. All right, Katherine, you've got a couple left, I believe. Maybe you don't, because you had 12 initially. You're at 13.
I think she added a couple along the way.
You've added a couple along the way, so I don't know how many you have left, and you still have left us lingering on Maya Rudolph as well.
Yeah, I've tapped out my original list.
Okay.
And then we added Hartman. And so that makes 13, you said?
Yep.
All right, I'll throw Maya in.
All right.
She can thank me later.
You want fries with that?
All right. So that brings us to Steve with his last pick then, I believe. And he's already told me who it is, but I'm really excited to hear what he's got to say about this performer.
All right. This guy doesn't play pretend. I've heard this. He doesn't pretend he's hearing it for the first time. I respect that. I'm going to go with Norm Macdonald because apparently I'm just voting for all cast members who've passed away. Watch out, Eddie Murphy. But yeah, Norm Macdonald. what can I say? It's, I mean, he was one of my favorite Weekend Update hosts. I mean, he was amazing as Bob Dole. Just going back and watching, stuff from his era, like he's known so well for being Weekend Update that it's easy to forget like how much other stuff he did in sketches.
Yes.
He wasn't like a Dennis Miller or a Tina Fey. Like, he had a lot of screen time on SNL and all of it was just gold. He was one of those guys who just did not give a hoot. And I mean, he was a brilliant guy. Like everybody says, people who have worked with thousands of comedic voices say, Norm Macdonald is one of the smartest guys I've ever worked with. And I mean, think of the stuff that we talk about. Like, how many people don't realize that he is the guy who created Celebrity Jeopardy? I mean, everybody loves that, but I don't think they realize that came from Norm. And just like a million examples like that of what he contributed to the show. I mean, we're also aware of the obvious ones, and we love him so much for that. But then you go and add all the less obvious stuff on top of that. It's like the dude killed it on that show. And even with it being cut short for some stupid firing, what he did on that show, and then to host like within the year of that. Come on.
Yes.
It's
too
so amazing.
Goddamn funny. Oh boy. Yeah, I'm a big Norm stan for sure. And I think you're right, Steve. You often forget like that body of work, like the impressions. Like he's got a handful of impressions that were like really fun impressions. His Quentin Tarantino was great. His Bob Dole was great.
Letterman.
His Letterman was funny. Yeah, man. Yeah, some really good stuff. So Norm Macdonald.
So I'll say, all right, I have one vote left.
You do, yeah.
And this is my wild card vote because there were a few people that I wrote down with question marks. Like these are the two I'm interested to see what cases other people make for them. And those two were Molly Shannon and Norm Macdonald.
Ah.
And here I stand, still undecided.
Oh, come on.
Because I think Molly Shannon's great, but Steve, I think you're right. At the end of the day, for a very casual SNL viewer, if you ask them what their favorite sketch is, it's most likely Celebrity Jeopardy.
Yes.
And I think, that can be the end of conversation, but then when there's a million other things you can tack on. So put my 15th vote down for Norm.
Hey.
Consider
Well, I'm glad he got some love because he was, I batted him around too. I just didn't feel like I could make the stronger case, but hey, you guys rose to the occasion. That's great.
You just felt like Taylor Swift is more talented, and that's fair.
Oh, God.
Yeah. You're not going to let
I'm going to make you regret it.
Is it too late to pull back a vote? Can we do that?
No.
No.
Yes, it is.
Just think about how funny Norm Macdonald would find that.
Yes.
Yeah. He would. That's great. Well, I really want to thank you for doing this. We've got some food for thought here for anybody listening in who has yet to vote. You've got until May 20th. And I think that's important to know. If you've already voted,
I want to thank you very much. Please tell your friends and relatives and family and everybody else you need to tell. Anyway, gang, I want to thank you very much.
I had a great
so
time
fun.
myself.
Thanks.
yeah. Thanks a lot, band, who are so timely. They know exactly when to come in. Just when the show ends, bam, they start, and it's just wonderful. So thanks, band. Hey, listen, I really also want to thank John Murray, Katherine Coleman, Steve Finn for joining myself today in the Pundit Round Table number 2. If you like what they had to say, check them out at SNL Podcast or the SNL Afterparty. You can put that into the Google machine, and it should turn up a number of suggestions, all of which should lead you to their website where you can enjoy their wonderful content. Anyway, that's what I've got for you this week. If you haven't voted, please, www.snlhof.com. Click on the vote tab, and there's a button. There's just a big button on the vote tab. All you have to do is push that button, and then boom, you get to vote. That's it. That's all there is to it. At the end of the day, we tabulate those votes, and I will tell you what's what on May 22nd. It's going to be spectacular. Anyway, that's what I've got for you. I said anyway, that's what I got for you now 3 times. What I'd really like you to do, though, is on your way out, turn off the lights, because the SNL Hall of Fame is now closed.
Thanks for listening to the SNL Hall of Fame podcast. You can find everything you need to know about the show at snlhof.com. Don't forget to subscribe, share, rate, and review the show wherever you get your podcasts. This is Doug Denant saying, this is Doug Denant saying, see you next month in the hall.
Podcasts and such.